People love to watch like a Transformers movie, these giant panels swinging around.
Hi, I'm Natalie from Autoweek, and it is my distinct honor to be in the car with Mr. Corvette himself, Tadge Juechter. For the millions and legions of Corvette fanatics out there, I mean, Tadge, it really is an honor to be talking to you. You are the rock star among rock stars for Vette fans.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but the car is really the rock star. There's thousands of people who get together, work together, sweat blood over this thing. It was a long time coming. That's been well documented. And for those of us who were working on it, it seemed like it took forever. And it was so nice to share it with the world and then have the reception the car has had, even though it's coming, it's a year since we started talking about it legitimately. Since, it was April of last year when Mary Barra and I drove around Times Square. That was the first time we actually publicly acknowledged, yes, we're doing this car. We're doing a mid-engine Corvette. We announced the reveal date. That was July of last year. So it's been a year where it's out there, and it seems like the passion and the interest in the car has hardly waned at all, even through the pandemic. It's shocking. It's like a pandemic-proof product, which you can't say about much except maybe toilet paper and cleaning products. It seems like there's very few consumer products that have come through essentially, unscathed for demand, and this car is one of those. It's a real privilege and honor to work on it.
So I'm actually in a 2020 Corvette Stingray, pretty much a base model. It's got a seat package in it, but this is the dark metallic gray with this beautiful torch red interior. I think that's what it's called. And it's smooth as a kitty cat to drive, all the power in the world like you expect from a Corvette when you just step on it, but still easy to go to the grocery store and, use as an everyday car. But you, Tadge, are in, I believe, a convertible. So we're in matchy cars, but I've got the Stingray, the coupe, and you've got the convertible.
I'll put it down. Some of the neighbors might come look and start talking to me. I'm sitting in a neighborhood.
I am as well. And
interview right now. No problem.
I've had to shoo 3 passers-by away too as we've been talking because they're walking in front of me, and I'm in a standard Stingray. But as you can see, I took the top out because this is the beauty of a Corvette. You're always able to take the top out. But you, sir, are in a full open convertible.
Yes, I am. I'm in an Accelerate yellow Corvette Stingray convertible. It's got a black interior with yellow stitch, which I really like. It's also got yellow calipers, which is pretty cool. So it all kind of ties in together. I've never been that much of a convertible guy. I am in this car because it's like the best of all worlds. It's 16 seconds to go top up, top down. So you can constantly change your mind. It's a retracting hardtop. So when the top's up, it's just like the coupe. It also has this cool thing where the mid window back here can go up and down by itself. So you can kind of tailor the wind buffeting, which is really nice. And then even when the top is all the way up, you can put this down independently, which lets you hear the engine even more. And it improves the ventilation, the flow-through ventilation, so you get a little more wind in your hair, but the top is still up. So there's so many ways to configure the car. It's super flexible.
Super cool.
I'll put the top up now.
And you can actually do it while you're driving, right? Up to what, 20 miles an hour? You can put the top up?
Up to 30. Yeah, 30 miles an hour. So at a stoplight, no problem. You can either put it up or put it down. What a lot of us do is like to show off. So as we're making an entrance, an arrival, you can either put it up or down. So as you're driving in to where you're going, you get the top moving, and it just makes everybody gawk like crazy.
It's a year in the making, but what, 60 years in the rumor or so?
Yes, it's been a long time coming. Since I was a young boy, I remember seeing the concept cars that were put out by General Motors, a whole bunch of really cool concept cars. The Aerovette, a 4-rotor car. I thought that was going to be a dream. It was like a spaceship, had this new kind of power plant, and the styling was otherworldly. And I thought, oh my God, that thing is just amazing. My life would be complete if I could just drive one of those. And little did I realize, all these years later, we'd be putting a mid-engine car on the road, and I would get to have a hand in it. It's just amazing, the course of history.
You've made a lot of dreams come true with bringing this finally to fruition.
It's fun to see the reaction from kids. I mean, even really little kids, they can barely walk, but they stand slack-jawed watching the car go by. That they even have a concept that it's a different kind of machine than what they're used to seeing.
It's genuinely eye-catching the first time you see one in motion. It's, one thing to see it on our websites and, read about it and seeing the launch last fall and the big air hangar. But the first time I saw it going down the road, it doesn't look like anything out there, but it's also immediately recognizable as a Corvette. And you go, there it is.
And that was a huge challenge, of course, as to how we could have taken the exact 7th generation car design language and applied it over to a mid-engine proportion and architecture. We could have done that because that car was very successful aesthetically. People found that very exciting to look at when we brought it out. But Corvettes, if you look at all the different generations, even though they sort of respect and carry some things over, we always try to do something different. We're not tied to some very narrow design version of the car. And, other people do like retro. They take their favorite historical version of a car and they bring that back. That's everybody's favorite. But the problem is, if you redo that car again, what are you going to do? Your second favorite version of the car? So it really isn't a good long-term strategy. And having been in the business 67 years and hoping to continue to do this for another 67 more, you can't just keep copying yourself from the past. You have to move it forward. You have to think of new ideas. You have to be creative. And I think our design team that works so well with our engineering and marketing team and everybody else, trying to solve technical problems in beautiful aesthetic ways, that's become a kind of a core strength of the team.
And you yourself are not new to the Corvette game. I mean, you started back on C5.
It seemed like I worked for General Motors forever before I even got to the Corvette team in 1993. But here it is, 27 years later, I got to work on C5, C6, C7, and now C8. So, when I got to the Corvette, it was heaven. It was like a mission to work on this car. I always liked high performance machinery. I grew up with a house full of Porsches. My dad was a Porsche guy, and he was a fighter pilot, and he drove that car hard. And so I got to understand the dynamics of a sports car. And so even though that car wasn't as beautiful as some, or as extravagant, as exotic as some of the Corvettes were at the time, ever since that time, I've wanted to sort of combine that aesthetic with the performance and dynamics, make a car that's just a joy to drive at any speed.
If I'm remembering, you took over as chief engineer from Mr. Hill for C7.
Yes, Dave Hill retired at the end of 2005. And so starting in 2006, I was the chief engineer of the Corvette. So we did a bunch of 6th generation cars. The 6th generation carried on for some time. Then we did C7 coming out of the General Motors bankruptcy. The 6th generation had been in production a very long time, so we immediately got to work on the 7th generation. But the whole time thinking about, well, ultimately the goal is for the 8th generation to go mid-engine and take advantage of what the architecture can provide.
So even during C7 design work, engineering work, you were already planning ahead for this car.
It's funny because as we were revealing the 7th generation, we were also having meetings on the 8th generation. So those of us who work on the program have to sort of detach our brains when we get out in public and say, okay, we got to really focus. It's only all about C7. Not going to talk about any of that stuff or, accidentally say something about what's coming in the future. So for us, it's a pretty big challenge between the way we talk at work, where we're looking at model years way, way out in advance, versus when we're in public, we have to look at what's just right in front of us right now, just what we're introducing today.
Is production up and running at full speed yet?
Well, coming out of the pandemic, which affected all of our automotive plants, but also our suppliers globally. Different countries have had different impacts. Different countries have had the wave peak and drop at different times. Different countries are opening up faster. Different companies, our suppliers, have different challenges with their employees and how they're doing their work. So late May, we brought the workforce back in. We had been working on 2 shifts since we didn't know exactly how many parts we're going to be able to get for the car. And remember, people have been off the work for a long time, so we have to sort of retrain them. We produce at such a low line rate, it's 12 an hour. You have 5 minutes of very intense operation for each car that comes by your station. That's a lot of muscle memory to develop and to understand and be able to do perfectly every time. And then we started slow and are just now getting up to 100% line rate on one shift. We're going to push on that for a little bit, try to work overtime as well. You know, the demand is still extremely high for the car. We want to fulfill as many orders as possible for it. So as soon as we're up and running and working overtime on first shift, that gives us the validation that we can start to plan for a second shift. And that's always been our plan. We want to run Bowling Green at 2 shifts. So we'll get to that as soon as possible.
Can you talk about the difficulties in transitioning to design a mid-engine car? I know there's a host of differences in, designing a front-engine car to a rear mid-engine car, but talk about some of the biggest challenges with that.
Well, you think about putting the engines in the back, and we have the Pontiac Fiero and the Corvair before that. So we've been doing design studies and building mules and trying different things out to make sure that it would be right coming right out of the box. So some of the big challenges are, the standard Corvette Stingray coupe has a removable roof, and it has to go somewhere. There have been manufacturers, us included at times, who've done a car with a removable roof where you're forced to leave it behind. So you leave it in your garage and hope for no rain. Corvettes have never done that. We've always had onboard storage for the roof all the way back to the 4th generation. So that was in the back of our minds. How do you have a rigid roof and where do you store it in the vehicle? Basically spoiled our customers. They don't buy our cars for luggage room, but ever since the 5th generation car, we've had more than adequate luggage room. In fact, almost excessively generous, where people have learned that they can have a 2-passenger sports car with the trunk room of a mid-size sedan. And so people evolve their lifestyles around that and that expectation. So putting the engine where that luggage would normally go was a big challenge. And it took quite a long time to figure out how to get it to where we'd have a good size compartment in the front, which we call a front trunk or a frunk, and then a good size, golf bag plus size trunk in the back that has enough room for the roof in it.
When I took it to our pandemic grocery run the other day, where we load up as many groceries as we can to get us through as long as possible. And I got everything for, 4 people in here, groceries for 3 weeks worth in here.
When you first look at the openings, you think, maybe there's not that much room in there, but you see how deep they are, and the rear one kind of tucks under and goes almost all the way down to the ground. It's surprising. I have a couple of nieces who love to climb in the car, and both of them like to get in the trunk. It's actually surprisingly big.
And I think the other big thing to talk about with this car, it's a kind of a controversy, I guess. And that is there's no manual option in that. Can you talk about that for a minute?
I have never purchased a car for my own use that was not a manual. So I've driven manuals my whole life. My first car was a manual. Every car I've ever bought in my life was manual. So this was not a trivial matter. We really wanted from the beginning to do a manual transmission. Even though the writing's on the wall, every year the penetration volume of manual transmission goes down, down, down. We used to offer Z06 and ZR1 in manual only. As soon as we started offering an automatic, it went up to 75, 80% penetration on automatics. And so originally when the program was scoped, we thought, well, let's see if we can figure out how to do a manual as well. But the bottom line is when you have an architecture that's this unique, and we basically have a bespoke transmission in order to enable what you see in the car and the placement of the engine, and the placement of the trans and the luggage room, and also the power and torque of the engines. And there was no supplier in the world willing to take on a manual version of that. So nobody willing to do that business with us. It would be an enormous development cost, an enormous investment. Once we realized that it just wasn't a possibility, we also looked at, what could we take advantage of? Like if you don't have 3 pedals on the floor, that let us put structural efficiencies in the car that we otherwise would not have been able to. And you're sitting in the car, you can feel the pedals are positioned exactly, perfectly straight on. If you get in a lot of mid-engine cars, you'll see the pedals are shoved inboard, and they're not exactly lined up so that you can sit square to the steering wheel and have the pedals straight in front of you. That's really the ideal driving position. That's what we had on our front engine cars, and it's very rare in a mid-engine car to be able to do that. And the reason is that that front tire is right under your left foot. It's tucked very far rearward to get the right weight distribution, front to rear. So being able to put optimal pedal position and efficient structure, very good thing that we don't have to cram that third pedal in. And then because we have electronic transmission range select, so automatic only, you have this kind of slick shifter mechanism on the console. And since that's electronic, there are 0 holes in the tunnel, which is the backbone of the car. So the center tunnel, which historically we've always had to punch a very big hole for the shifter and the linkage through to get through to the transmission. We don't have to do that anymore. It's all done electronically. And so that makes that structural piece very robust as well. Even though it's sad that we don't have a manual, and I wish we had one myself, not having one let us optimize the car much more effectively, and it's better for the vast majority of our customers who would have selected an automatic anyway. And I have to say, you know, we say that DCT is an automatic, but it's also really a manual transmission. If you drive it like a manual, it's very satisfying like a manual. Yes, you don't have the clutch on the floor, but the paddles are instantly responsive. You can do like double paddle neutral. So if you like to coast when you drive, which I'm actually a coaster too, I like to, you know, look at the traffic situation. There'll be times I just want to coast the car. Or if you want to, you know, grab neutral and give a pop of the throttle, gives people a rev as you go by. There's a lot of ways that you can be engaged in driving like it was manual transmission.
And we can't have a conversation about Corvette, C8 or otherwise without talking about the possibility of a Z06 down the road.
Race program is a test bed for performance, whether it's applied to the Stingray or any other future models. We try to apply what we learn on the track to upcoming years' production for sure.
And I'm going to guess that you have the same answer for a possibility of a ZR1.
We have no announcements about any future product. All we've announced is that we are going to do a 2021 model. We got some exciting new colors. We do a torch red, which is this bright, high-impact red like the seats that you're sitting in. And then we've always done a more muted, like a candy apple red, like a liquid, little more toned down color, but very rich looking. We're doing kind of a tweener for 21, where it's got a ton of like orange fire in it. It's a red car, but it looks like it's got orange fire in it. Just beautiful. I haven't seen a car painted. All I've seen is like plaques of it. So I was so excited to see that color that for my 2021 captured test fleet, so the company car that we'll drive before customers get them, I spec'd that color as soon as I could. I really want to see that. I'm very excited about it.
I will accept all of your dodged answers to my questions regarding Zeos. But it was a pleasure to talk with you. I'm excited about driving this car for another hour before they come take it away from me.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for your questions, and thank you very much for tolerating my non-answers.
Thank you, Tadge.